Hello and welcome to the Carnival of Souls. I'm your host, Clockwork Ghosty. Tonight, we'll be doing a countdown of the top 10 Ed and Lorraine Warren paranormal cases. Let's begin. Ed and Lorraine Warren were a normal couple living a normal life. They met when Ed was 17 and Lorraine was 16 at the theater where Ed worked. Later, he would go on to join the Navy. His ship went down, but he survived. While on survivor's leave, he and Lorraine married. Once Ed returned from World War II, he and Lorraine had a daughter. Ed would go on to Perry Art School to paint for about 2 years. After getting fed up with the way they taught, Ed dropped out. He continued to paint, selling his work for $3 or $4, a good price for that time. It was through painting that Ed and Lorraine would get into ghost investigation. As a child, Ed had gone through a paranormal event. If Ed heard of any place that claimed to be haunted, whether a haunted house or a haunted location, he would drag Lorraine to check it out. Lorraine would complain and say there was no such thing as ghosts. Then Ed would then remind her of his days at his haunted home in Bridgeport, and Lorraine would go. To get a foot in the door, Ed would stand out in the street and would sketch the house. Then Lorraine would take the sketch up to the house and knock on the door, telling them her husband loved to sketch and paint haunted houses and had made the sketch especially for the resident. Once they were admitted in the inn, they would talk with the owners one-on-one. Ed and Lorraine were Catholic, but they work with people of all faiths, with the belief that Catholics are not the only faith to be saved. That's a little background on our two heroes. Now, let's begin the countdown. Number 10. Sandy Hook Evil Idol. Found in the woods of Sandy Hook, this idol was used for Satanistic rituals. A young deer hunter stumbled across it. He said he got a feeling of dread from it. He left it feeling unnerved. On the footpath as he walked away, he come across a man dressed in black, with white hair and a white beard. He felt unnerved by the man and asked if he knew how to get out of the woods. The man said nothing and just pointed. The statue now resides at Ed and Lorraine Warren's museum. Number 9. Union Cemetery, Easton, Connecticut. Ed and Lorraine Warren have done extensive investigation of this site, as have dozens of other paranormal investigators, gathering a substantial amount of video and photographic evidence. The Warrens have even published a book about the cemetery entitled Graveyard: True Hauntings from an Old New England Cemetery. The White Lady, who has been seen by dozens of witnesses and even captured on video, most famously by Ed, and still images as well, is one of the most prolific specters there. She's been described as wearing a white gown and having long black hair. Apparently she's a bit of a prankster, as she likes to appear in the middle of Route 59 and be hit by a car, only to have the poor shaken driver stop and check around to find no one. Number 8. The Demonic Werewolf in London. Monday, December 5th, 1983, Bill was driving towards a cab company when suddenly he was overcome with pain in the middle of his chest. It went on into his right arm. He went to the emergency room where 2 nurses helped him. He suddenly let out a roar and bit one of the nurses. The other called for help and an officer come on the scene. They got him restrained to a gurney, and when he came to his senses, he then found himself being admitted to Runwell Mental Hospital. Ed and Lorraine Warren, John Zavis, a paranormal researcher, and Bill's wife Nina gathered at the church to witness Bill's exorcism. The Warrens had come across Bill Ramsey's case from an episode of a TV show by the name of Incredible Sunday. They had tracked him down with the help of the police. Also present were David Alfred and John Cleve from the newspaper The People. Bishop Robert McKenna had performed many exorcisms before. He had hired 4 off-duty police officers in case Bill went violent. The bishop touched his stole to Bill's forehead and then gripped his head firmly, ordering the demon to leave him forever. Bill trembled uncontrollably and felt an urge to maul at the bishop. the bishop pressed a crucifix against Bill's face, causing Bill to snarl and growl and pounce upon the bishop. The bishop retreated, and then holding the crucifix high, he spoke in Latin. Bill felt his body becoming weaker and warmer, and with a last faint roar, the feelings faded. His rage slowly normalized. The demon had left. Bill felt purified and unburdened. The Warrens haven't been able to produce any photos or material evidence, but the very presence of the famous demonologist couple and paranormal collector John Zaffis, as well as the famous exorcist Bishop McKenna, greatly increased the credibility. Also, Bill Ramsey has never been reported to actually shapeshift. Only wolf-like behaviors were noted. This is when the theories of demonopathy, a psychiatric disease in which one is convinced that he is possessed by a demon, and clinical lycanthropy, a psychiatric disorder causing the victim to form an impression that he sometimes truly shapeshifts into a werewolf, come forth. But the superhuman strength demonstrated by Ramsey in his childhood, while he uprooted a fence post, and as an adult at the South End Hospital, speak in favor of the paranormal theories. Number 7. The Smurl haunting. The Smurls claim that beginning in 1974, their double-block home located at 328 Chase Street in the city of West Pittston, Pennsylvania, was disturbed by a demon that caused loud noises and bad odors, threw their dog into a wall, shook their mattress, pushed one of their daughters down a flight of stairs, and physically and sexually assaulted Jack on several occasions. In 1986, the family brought in Ed and Lorraine. According to Ed, the demon that inhabited the Smurls' house was very powerful, and that it shook mirrors and furniture after they tried to persuade it to leave by playing religious music and praying. Warren claimed he felt a drop in temperature and saw a dark mass form in the home, and the demon once left a message in a mirror telling him to get out. After months of investigation, Warren alleged that he had a number of audio tapes containing knocking and rapping caused by the demon. Number 6. Haunting in Connecticut. In 1986, Carmen and Al Snedeker moved to the small town of Southington, Connecticut, with the purpose of being closer to the hospital at which their oldest son was being treated for Hodgkin's lymphoma. Having fallen on hard financial times, the family jumped at the chance to rent what appeared to be the perfect house. It was large enough for their family, which included 3 children and a cousin, and the rent was in their affordable price range. It was while they were moving in that Al made a startling discovery. In the basement was a peculiar room that was complete with embalming tables and tools. The house, it turned out, used to be a funeral home. Sadly, the basement, which was sectioned into several rooms, was the only room deemed large enough to serve as the 2 boys' bedroom. Not long after, Carmen says she began experiencing strange phenomena, like items disappearing and her children reporting seeing strange people in the house, as well as hearing voices and the sounds of hundreds of birds taking flight. Her oldest, who was at the time in the middle of radiation treatment, began to exhibit radical personality shifts, becoming withdrawn and angry. He brooded and began writing poetry with necrophiliac themes. During one intense episode, he attacked his cousin with the intent to rape her. His family had him arrested and taken for an evaluation, where he was pronounced schizophrenic. He was removed from the house and seemed to get better until returning. Other phenomenon reported by the Snedekers included the repeated and brutal rape of both Carmen and her niece, as well as acts of sodomy being performed on her husband by unseen entities. Mop water was reported to turn blood red, and the scents of rotting flesh and decay were reported throughout the house. She was also frightened of apparitions that she saw, one with long black hair and black eyes, the other with white hair and eyes, and wearing a pinstripe tuxedo. It was then that Carmen decided to contact Ed and Lorraine, along with John Zaffis and a few other investigators. The Warrens moved into the house for several weeks until they'd experienced everything the Snedekers claimed. During their time in the house, they claimed to have seen firsthand the damage the demons in the home could inflict, with many members being slapped and beaten, pushed, and slammed to the floor. Investigation into the history of the house supposedly revealed that one of the undertakers at the funeral home was found guilty of necrophilia, which fed fuel to the fire. It got to the point that the Warrens deemed it necessary for a full-scale exorcism of the property, after which the house was judged clean by the Warrens. With the evil banished from the house, that should have been the end of the story, but it wasn't. Number 5. Trial of Arne Cheyenne Johnson. The trial of Arne Cheyenne Johnson, also known as the Devil Made Me Do It case, is the first known court case in the United States in which the defense sought to prove innocence based upon the defendant's claim of demonic possession and denial of personal responsibility for the crime. On November 24th, 1981, in Brookfield, Connecticut, Arne Cheyenne Johnson was convicted of first-degree manslaughter for the killing of his landlord, Alan Bono. According to the testimony by the Gletzel family, 11-year-old David Gletzel had allegedly played host to the demon that forced Johnson to kill Bono. After witnessing a number of increasing ominous occurrences involving David, the family, exhausted and terrified, decided to enlist the aid of Ed and Lorraine in a last-ditch effort to cure David. The Gletzel family, along with the Warrens, then proceeded to have David exorcised by a number of Catholic priests. The process continued for several days, concluding when, according to those present, a demon fled the child's body and took up residence within Johnson. Several months later, Johnson killed his landlord during a heated conversation. His defense lawyer argued in court that he was possessed, but the judge ruled that such a defense could never be proven, and was therefore infeasible in a court of law. Johnson was subsequently convicted, though he only served 5 years of a 10 to 20-year sentence. The trial attracted media attention from around the world and has obtained a level of notoriety due to numerous depictions of events in literature and television. The Enfield Poltergeist. Number 4. In August 1977, single-parent Peggy Hodgson called police to her rented home in Enfield after 2 of her 4 children claimed that furniture was moving and knocking sounds were heard on walls. The children, including Margaret 14, Janet 11, Johnny 10, and Billy 7. A police constable said that she saw a chair slide on the floor and was convinced that nobody there had touched it, and later claims included alleged demonic voices, loud noises, thrown rocks and toys, overturned chairs, and children levitating. Reports of further incidents in the house attracted considerable press attention, and the story was covered in British newspapers such as the Daily Mail and Daily Mirror, until reports come to an end in 1979. The Warrens briefly investigated the Enfield poltergeist in the summer of 1978, and were just 2 of the many investigators to visit the Hodgson's Green Street home. Allegedly, this case was said to be a hoax. The children were found sometimes doing some of the things themselves as pranks and for the cameras to get attention. Number 3. The Piran family haunting. In the winter of 1970, Roger and Carolyn Piran and their 5 children moved into a quaint 2-story home located in the seemingly quiet countryside of Horaceville, Rhode Island, called the Old Arnold Estate. The farmhouse wasted no time in unleashing its terror upon its new inhabitants. Though the entire family was subjected to paranormal encounters, Carolyn seemed to receive the most ghostly attention. She described one of her earliest incidents in the Providence Journal, saying she awoke to a woman in gray dress, her head hanging off to the side, and a voice moaned, get out, I'll drive you out with death and gloom." Levitating beds, floating household objects, and strange noises in the night persisted. But the worst of the haunting come when an evil entity tormented Carolyn from within. Her name was Bathsheba Thayer. She was born in Rhode Island in 1812 and lived in the surrounding countryside of Harrisville with her husband, Judson Sherman. Records indicate that Bathsheba gave birth to 4 children, 3 of whom died very young. While the infant mortality rate remained high throughout the 19th century, these particular deaths fueled rumors that Bathsheba practiced dark arts and even sacrificed her baby daughter to the devil. None of the accusations can be proven. Journalist Jamie Rubio provides a finely researched counter-narrative to Thayer's life on her blog. Nevertheless, the account clearly had an impact on the Perrons, who were convinced that Bathsheba's spirit haunted their home. At first, the ghost used physical force to urge Carolyn to leave. A pinch here, a slap there was just the start. But the torture grew worse. Soon it taunted Carolyn with fire and stabbed her with what Carolyn described as a needle. When Carolyn and her family still didn't leave, the spirit possessed Carolyn from within. Upon their arrival at the Perron home, Lorraine instantly sensed the darkness emanating from Carolyn. In an attempt to free the family from their haunting, the Warrens set about spiritually cleansing the household. In reality, however, the Warrens did not solve the Perron family's spectral problems. In fact, the paranormal researchers only seemed to further aggravate the dark forces at work. The Perrons remained bound to their house of horrors for years due to financial constraints. Finally, in 1980, they were able to sell the property. The Perrons fled to Georgia, far from the darkness of Arnold Estate. Paranormal forces reportedly followed the family southward, though their present-day encounters are far less extreme than those experienced in Rhode Island farmhouse. Andrea, the eldest of the Perron children, has since penned a 3-volume series called House of Darkness, House of Light that chronicles her family's chilling experience. Number 2. Annabelle. In 1970, a mother purchased an antique Raggedy Ann doll from a hobby store for her daughter's birthday. Donna, the woman's daughter, was preparing to graduate from college with a nursing degree. She lived in a tiny apartment with her roommate, Angie. Pleased with the cute Raggedy Ann doll, Donna placed it on her bed as a decoration and didn't give it a second thought. Within days, both Donna and Angie noticed that there appeared to be something very strange and creepy about the doll. The doll mysteriously seemed to move about the house, relatively small movements at first, such as a change in position, folding her legs and arms. Other times it would be found upright, standing on its feet. Donna sometimes left the doll on the couch before leaving for work, and returned to find the doll back in her room on the bed with the door closed. Annabelle, the doll, not only moved, but could write as well. After a month into their experience, Donna and Angie began to find messages on parchment paper that read, "Help us," and "Help Lou," the handwriting as if written by a small child. The creepy part was about the messages was that the wording was not the wording, but the way they were written. At the time, Donna had never kept parchment paper on which the notes were written in the house. One night, Donna come home to find the doll had moved again, back to her room. Donna had come to find that this was typical of the doll, but somehow she knew this time it was different. Something wasn't right. A sense of fear came over her when she inspected the doll and saw what looked like blood drops on the back of its hands and its chest. Scared and desperate, Donna and Angie decided it was time to seek expert advice. Not knowing where to turn, they contacted a medium, and a seance was held. Donna was then introduced to the spirit of Annabelle Higgins. The medium related the story of Annabelle to both Donna and Angie, telling them that Annabelle was a young girl that resided on the property before the apartments were built. They were happy times. She was a young girl of only 7 years old when her lifeless body was found in a field upon which the apartment complex now stands. The spirit related to the medium that she felt comfortable with Donna and Angie and wanted to stay with them and be loved. Feeling compassion for Annabelle and her story, Donna gave her permission to inhabit the doll and stay with them. They were soon to find out, however, that was not a good idea, and that Annabelle was not a young girl, but an inhuman demon in nature. After an experience, Donna felt it was time to seek real expert advice and contacted an Episcopal priest named Father Hegan. Father Hegan felt it was a spiritual matter and felt he needed to contact a higher authority in the church, so he contacted Father Cook, who, with Donna, Angie, and Lou, a friend of theirs, came to the immediate conclusion that the doll itself was not in fact possessed but manipulated by an inhuman presence. Spirits do not possess inanimate objects like houses or toys. They possess people. An inhuman spirit can attach itself to a place or object, and this is what occurred in the Annabelle the doll case. It was looking to possess a human host. The spirit, or in this case, an inhuman demonic spirit, was essentially in the infestation stage of the phenomenon. It first began moving the doll around the apartment by means of teleportation to arouse the occupants' curiosity in hopes that they would give it recognition. Then, predictably, the mistake of bringing a medium into the apartment to communicate with it. The inhuman spirit, now able to communicate through the medium, preyed on the girl's emotional vulnerability by pretending to be a rather harmless, lost young girl, with which during the seance was allowed permission from Donna to haunt the apartment. Insofar as a demonic is a negative spirit, it then set about causing potential negative phenomenon to occur. It aroused fear through the weird movements of that doll. It brought about the materialization of disturbing handwritten notes, the symbolic drops of blood on the doll, and ultimately it even attacked Lou, leaving behind the symbolic mark of the beast. The next stage of the infestation phenomena would have been complete human possession. Had these experiences lasted another 2 or 3 more weeks, the spirit would have completely possessed, if not harmed or killed, one or all of the occupants in the house. At the conclusion of the investigation, the Warrens felt it appropriate to recitate an exorcism blessing by Father Cook to cleanse the apartment. The Episcopal blessing of the home is a wordy 7-page document that is distinctively positive in nature. Rather than specifically expelling evil entities from the dwelling, the emphasis is instead directed toward filling the home with the power of the positive and of God. Or so says Ed Warren. At Donna's request, and as a further precaution against the phenomenon ever occurring in the home again, the Warrens took the big rag doll along with them when they left. Father Cook, although uncomfortable with his role as an exorcist, agreed to perform the 7-page rite of exorcism, a doctrine he recited throughout the apartment, at which point the Warrens were confident the entity would no longer reside there. They agreed to take the rag doll back home with them. Upon leaving, Ed placed the doll in the back seat and agreed he would not take the interstate in the event the inhuman spirit still resided within the doll. His suspicions were all too correct. In no time, the Warrens felt themselves as the object of a vicious hatred. Then, at each dangerous curve, the car swerved and stalled, with every corner causing the power steering and brakes to fail. Repeatedly, the car verged on collision. Ed reached into the back seat, into his black bag, and took out a vial of holy water and doused the doll, making the sign of the cross over it. The disturbances stopped immediately, and the Warrens arrived safely home. After the Warrens arrived home, Ed set the doll in a chair next to his desk. The doll levitated a number of times in the beginning, then it seemed to fall inert. During the ensuing weeks, however, it began showing up in various rooms of the house. When the Warrens were away and had the doll locked up in the outer office building, they would often return to find it sitting comfortably upstairs in Ed's easy chair when they opened the main front door. The doll also showed a hatred for clergymen who came to the house. In one instance, Father Jason Bradford, a Catholic exorcist, came to the house. Upon seeing the doll seated in the chair, he picked it up and said, "You're just a rag doll, Annabelle. You can't hurt anyone," and tossed the doll back in the chair, at which point Ed exclaimed, "That's one thing you better not say." Upon leaving an hour later, Lorraine pleaded to the priest to please be careful driving and to call her when he arrived home. Lorraine discerned tragedy for this young priest, but he had to go his way. A few hours later, Father Jason called Lorraine and explained that his brakes had failed as he entered a busy intersection. He was a priest, but he was involved in a near-fatal accident, destroying his vehicle. This was just one of many such events that occurred over the next few years. The Warrens had a special case built for Annabelle outside the Occult Museum. Let's read that again. The Warrens had a special case built for Annabelle inside the Occult Museum, where she resides to this day. Since the case was built, Annabelle no longer appeared to move, but she is thought to be responsible for the death of a young man who came to the museum on a motorcycle with his girlfriend. The young man, after hearing Ed's account of the doll, defiantly went up and began to bang on the case, insisting that if the doll can put scratches on people, then he wanted to also be scratched. Ed said to the young man, "Son, you need to leave," and put him out of the building. On the way home, the young man and his girlfriend were laughing and making fun of the doll when he lost control of his motorcycle and he went head-on into a tree. The young man was killed instantly, but his girlfriend survived and was hospitalized for over a year. When asked what happened, The young woman explained that they were laughing about the doll when they lost control of the motorcycle. Ed warns you, do not challenge evil, that no man is more powerful than Satan. And the number one case by Ed and Lorraine is the Amityville Horror. On November 13th, 1974, in Amityville, New York, Ronald DeFeo burst into Harry's bar screaming his parents had been shot. Police discovered the bodies of 6 members of the DeFeo family. Father, mother, and 4 of the 5 DeFeo children were found, face down, executed in their beds. Ronald claimed he wasn't home during the murders and only discovered the bodies of his parents prior to arriving at Harry's bar. But after police found a gun box for a .35 Merlin rifle in Ronald's room, he subsequently confessed. After a lengthy trial, Ronald DeFeo was found guilty of the heinous murders and was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. But there's never been a solid explanation of how just this one person, acting alone, could take the lives of these 6 people in an upscale residential community, and the shots from an unsilenced .35 Merlin rifle were never heard, while the victims showed no sign of struggle, all found face down. Toxicology showed no signs of the family being drugged, and forensics felt the bodies were never moved. In comes the Lutz family. On November 18th, 1975, the Lutz family moved into the DeFeo home. Though it had only been 13 months since the DeFeo murders had occurred, George and Kathleen Lutz thought that Dutch Colonial was a lovely home and a steal at $80,000, never expecting they'd have to leave it all behind 28 days later. A Catholic priest arrived while the Lutz family was unpacking to bless the family home. As the priest made his way upstairs to the 2nd floor, entering the bedroom which had formerly belonged to Mark and John DeFeo, he began sprinkling holy water, at which point an unseen voice told the priest, "Get out," which he hastily did. The priest did not tell the Lutz family about the voice, but he did warn them, do not use the upstairs room as a bedroom, and do not let anyone sleep in there. Although ominous, the Lutz family abided by the words of the priest and turned the room into a sewing room. From the very first night they moved in, the family claimed they felt strange sensations. Within days, words of the priest, family's personality had drastically changed. Arguments ensued. George was plagued by a constant chill and spent all of his time feeding the fireplace. George also noticed a change in his grooming habits, and his and Kathy's health declined drastically. The Lutz daughter began spending all her time in her room playing with an imaginary friend. She described a red-eyed pig called Jody, who would transform not only shape but size, at times being larger than the house. Jody also claimed she could not be seen by anyone else unless she wanted them to. Mysterious foul odors would emanate from different locations of the house. Black stains appeared on the toilets and ceramic fixtures. Kathy was touched by an unseen force, and a green gelatinous substance would appear throughout the house. Hundreds of flies appeared in the sewing room despite it being the dead of winter. George would wake up nightly at 3:15 a.m., which coincided with the time the police felt the DeFeos were murdered. George also awoke one night to witness his wife transformed into a 90-year-old hag, and the next night she began levitating off the bed. The Lutz family tried on numerous occasions to contact the Catholic priest, only to find the phones would cut out whenever they would try to call. After failing to get the priest to return, the family took matters into their own hands. Armed with a crucifix, they walked throughout the house reciting the Lord's Prayer. A chorus of voices erupted in response, asking them, "Will you stop?" The final night they reported to be the worst, banging and rapping as loud as marching bands emanated throughout the house, and furniture being moved by its own accord, and the children being terrorized. After 28 days in the DeFeo home, the family claimed they could take no more. They grabbed only a few belongings and fled the house, taking shelter at Kathy Lutz's mother's home in nearby Babylon. 20 days after the Lutz fled, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren were called in by Marvin Scott, a news reporter with Channel 5 New York, who had covered the Amityville story and worked on the prior investigations with the Warrens. A team of reporters, investigators, and parapsychologists were assembled by Ed and met at the home at 112 Ocean Avenue. The Lutz family refused to re-enter the home during the investigation. During the investigation, Ed was physically pushed to the floor while using some religious provocations in the basement. Lorraine was also overwhelmed by the sense of a demonic presence and was plagued by her psychic impressions of the DeFeo family's bodies laid along the floor, covered in white sheets, and a sense of physically being pushed back. The research team also captured the image of a spirit that appeared as a little boy peering from the second floor. The land was also found to be used by John Ketchum. John Ketchum was a practicing black magician and had a cottage on the land prior to the construction of the Dutch Colonial in 1924. John requested that his remains be buried on the property, and they remain there till this day. The Shinnecock Indians also at one time had an enclosure on this land that was used to house the sick and the mad. Those in this enclosure were left to die. The Warrens believed that the suffering there had left the property with a very negative energy and dark history, and that such a negative history was a magnet for demonic spirits and the preternatural. The Warrens believed these energies directly impacted the lives of both the DeFeos and the Lutzes. The Warrens retrieved a handful of the Lutzes' earthly possessions. Indeed, for the property, the Lutz sold the rest of their belongings and relocated to California. The Ocean Avenue home that was once purchased for $80,000 in 1975 by the Lutz family sold for $950 in 2010 and is again on the market. There have been no further reports of activity from recent residents. Well, that's the top 10 Ed and Lorraine Warren paranormal cases. Hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more fun, fear, and entertainment. Later.